Our first speaker this morning is Scott Simon. Scott is currently the director of the Nature Conservancy in Arkansas. He joined TNC in Arkansas as a land steward in 1996 and has served as director since 2003. While we know him for his successes here, he has also helped develop conservation projects in Central America and Africa. He worked as a wetlands ecologist for the Illinois Natural History Survey and was an instructor at the University of Illinois. He is an important voice for conservation to political decision makers and testifies before congressional and state legislative committees. Scott is going to introduce you to our style of collaboration here in Arkansas that includes developing broader constituencies for better conservation outcomes. Let's welcome Scott Simon.
You guys are awesome. Well, what I thought I'd like to do today is first, and here's the event. And first, if you look at the list of sponsors, you'll notice, wow, that's a little different. And it almost epitomizes the Arkansas style. You'll notice some of the sponsors that may not have been on any of the previous Natural Areas Association conferences. So an agricultural organization like the Farm Bureau, Evan Teague is here. Natural gas company, Southwestern Energy. Big box retailer, Walmart. Timber companies, Hancock Timber. Arkansas is a relatively small community, small conservation community, very social, and so we all work together very easily. And I thought today what I would do is 4 things. Take a tour of some of our large-scale, multi-partner conservation programs. And then some of my own reflections on how some of these partnerships work effectively. As you can tell from my accent, I didn't grow up in Arkansas. I came here as an outsider, and so I really have learned a lot from my current colleagues. Then get the perspective from some of the people who work here, say, well, what makes a good partner? What do they look for in a partner? And then lastly, I'd close with a couple of stories just related to constituency building, some efforts that worked and some efforts that didn't work as well. So let's take a tour. 5 places, starting in the uplands, starting in the mountains and the hills of the Ozarks and the Ouachitas in northwest Arkansas. These are the upland oak woodlands of the pine oak ecosystem, where there's a really diverse partnership working to move this landscape from what we all know so well as those closed canopy, overly dense woodlands, to a much more open style. Starting with small goals, which they now have a goal of 2 million acres, moving from those dense woodlands into the desired future condition, with over 500,000 acres in Arkansas that now look like this. And then this is Pilot Knob, north of I-40, west of Little Rock, with another 1 million acres that are actively undergoing restoration. The multi-partner burn is a typical, enjoyable activity in our state. This is at Grandview Wildlife Management Area with several partners working together. Not yet, Joe. Yeah, you're right. This is perfect. There's going to be a story behind this one. And then an active training program, which is a cornerstone to the entire restoration effort, with the Arkansas Forestry Commission leading a week-long prescribed fire training workshop with a dozen other partners in support every year out at Camp Robinson, where over the years they have trained 600 natural resource managers in prescribed fire. But the real work is just the reconnection, because this is where all the new projects are hatched, on the fire line. Well, moving underneath the upland oak woodlands into the fascinating underground ecosystem of karst occurs throughout the Ozarks and northwest Arkansas, where a very entertaining group of people from the Fish and Wildlife Service and several grottos, Nature Conservancy, have been working together over a decade mapping these areas, identifying and inventorying caves, and along the way, describing a couple of new species to science every year, year in and year out. And then once they have their prioritized list, the land acquisition people get to work, where just in the past 5 or 6 years have conserved a dozen priority cave openings and major portions of their recharge area. But the really cool work that they do is with their outside constituencies, because we can't just buy it all. And so this karst team has worked with developers, local planning districts, companies in the Ozarks of Arkansas and Missouri to get support around an idea of mapping where the most important karst areas are and karst features on the ground. Those are the areas in red, where if you developed it and there was a spill or sedimentation, it's most likely to go into the groundwater unfiltered. This map is on the Northwest Arkansas Planning Commission web page. I mean, there's a map with areas coded red, yellow, and green. And it has positively moved roads, landfills, dozens, roads, landfills, quarries out of the red in the planning stage and into the green with no public drama. And then for landowners that have land in the red, that's where Fish and Wildlife Service focuses its private lands money for endangered species. They've just done an incredible job. And flowing out of all these rivers, out of all these caves, are some of the coolest, most beautiful rivers in North America, filled with rare species, but extensively used for recreation and fishing and canoeing, swimming. This is the Buffalo. But like many of the rivers around the country, they're facing some pretty substantial threats. In our case, the problem is sediment. And about a third of the sediment is coming from, severely eroding, steep, unpaved roads. And about 40% of the sediment is coming from eroding stream banks and rivers that just can't process all that sediment that's coming from the watershed. So it's almost like a 1-2 punch. Well, the conservation community is working in two main areas in working to help restore and protect our rivers. In the upland parts of the watershed, it's all about the roads. And so it's conservation partners working with individual county judges that have problem eroding unpaved roads, developing fixes, and then organizing workshops around it so that the local road crews can learn the best practices. Farther down into the watershed on the main stems of these rivers itself, it's bringing back the river back into its natural sinuosity and repairing and stabilizing the eroding reaches of the river and the eroding stream banks. And in this case, in our state, much of this is supported and funded by private companies, Walmart, Southwestern Energy, Tyson, many others, with public partners coming around it and working in a particular community. In this case, this project is located in the community of Clinton. Some of you will go visit this, north of Little Rock, about an hour. And this is a picture of them putting in a structure called a towwood structure that will help protect the bank, the eroding stream bank, which will then be planted. And what a finished project looks like with the replanted bank, the same location in the background. Well, eventually these rivers flow into South Arkansas, which we call the coastal plain, and this is an area called the pine flatwoods, which is one of the least protected forest types in North America, with which a very interesting partnership has come together to identify a goal of about 100,000 acres of this remaining forest type that they would like to maintain in native habitat, while much of the rest of the landscape is being converted to pine plantations, and identified some pearls along some of our major rivers, the Washita and the Saline. Currently, the partnership has acquired about 47,000 acres, which is actively undergoing restoration. And so think about it. These are pine woodlands and pine plantations being thinned, logging on natural areas, logging on nature preserves, and places with endangered species. Red-cockaded woodpecker, largest population of a federally endangered plant. That's Bill Holloman. at one of the releases for red-cockaded woodpeckers at Warren Prairie. And then eventually, these rivers flow into eastern Arkansas, locally called the Delta, the Mississippi River floodplain, large expanse of bottomland hardwoods and swamps, one of the largest blocks in North America, where the threat here has been historic conversion. One watershed, the Cache River, 91% of the bottomland hardwoods were cleared, leaving it only 9% forested. A massive restoration effort here led by the Natural Resource Conservation Service, many other partners to bring the forest back. Over the years, they've planted more than 150,000 acres of trees, tens and tens and tens and millions of trees. And in the Cache River watershed alone, it's now 24% forested. So we're able to see real progress, from satellite imagery and high altitude aerial photography. But interestingly, it wasn't enough. We got great habitat, but the water quality didn't improve like we thought. So the partners rehuddled and said, tried to figure out where it's coming from, and they found, well, a lot of the sediment is coming from the rivers, the eroding rivers and the eroding headwater agricultural ditches themselves. And so now are testing a variety of river restoration techniques in the Delta, both far up in the watershed, turning ditches into meandering streams, and lower down into the watershed on some of the very large rivers that the Corps of Engineers manages, like the Lower Cache River, which was channelized 40 years ago, a portion of it, and then the partners are have opened up the plugs and allowing the river to access the historic meandering channel that's still there. This is centered around the community and town of Clarendon. And the project is working as designed. New pools are being dug, new riffles are being formed, and water quality has increased substantially, just even within the first year. So a lot of good progress that a group of people that are working on. And so what makes a good partnership? And we have a saying here in Arkansas, that a good partnership develops good projects, and good projects get funded. And the title of the talk is collaboration. And so I added a definition that we fine-tuned from the dictionary. But I have some of my own observations as oftentimes an observer of these other multi-partner teams. And I think most importantly, like the definition says, they start with a vision, but it's a shared vision that people develop together. It has a very simple and focused, and as far as the number of pages, relatively short plan. I'm always amazed by how simple our plans are, but focused. There's meetings. Yeah, sure, there's meetings. But what I observe, they're field meetings. And in the Southern style, people talk a lot. I mean, they do a lot of talking during these meetings. And in the beginning, as a Northerner, I thought, oh my God, these people talk a lot. But what I realized is there's a real purpose to it. Because what they're doing is they're learning from each other. They're understanding each other's goals and their fears and their dreams and their constraints. When they actually do have a meeting, there's very little new information. It is oftentimes a summary of the individual threads that people pulled from the field meeting. And if something's unclear, well, guess what? A couple of them, in this case, Doug Zollner with the Nature Conservancy, Bill Holloman with Natural Heritage Commission, they'll have a pre-meeting. I just noticed that the partners do not show up at these meetings unprepared. The meeting is really the time for everybody to look at each other and say, yep, that's what we all talked about, that's what we're gonna do. The other thing that I notice is they don't wear each other out. They might only have a few meetings, enough meetings to keep things from becoming chaotic and spiraling outside of control, but not too much. And then, with my friend Clint Harris here, Joe Fox, thank you, sorry about that, they energetically work the plan with a level of sort of partner enthusiasm, which is really interesting. And the goals of the partnership, and many of the managers here know what we're talking about, those will be translated into the individual organization's goals for the year, or individual staff members. And then finally, what they'll do is they'll develop their messages together about how they're going to talk about it. And it's one unified set of talking points, so that if any individual one of them is working, like McCree Anderson here at Crystal Bridges doing burns around a major art museum, he is emphasizing the points about prescribed fire that the partnership wants him to make. They're all speaking off the same set of music. So we got a visit from one of our friends at the Washington office, and like many of you, we get audited, so we got audited by our national office because they want to see, well, how does this group in Arkansas is able to accomplish so many different conservation projects? And when they left, they had one main theme, and they said, well, now we figure out how you all get so much done. You have really, really great partners. It really doesn't have that much to do with you. It's about the people that you work with. And so I thought we'd bring up a few partners.
Are you sure?
Hey, Joe, how's it going?
Are you sure? It's going
Yes,
great.
it's an iterative effort. So first up is Joe Fox, our state forester, director of the Arkansas Forestry Commission, to lead them in answering the question from their own perspective. Hey, what does it mean to be a good partner?
A good partner supports his partners, her partners' goals, and knows their mission.
Communication. Scott talked about how we like to talk in the South, and I think most of us put a lot of effort and a lot of concentration into talking. We want to tell about our opinions, our goals, our views. But the listening side of communication requires just as much effort and concentration, maybe more, than the speaking side. So it's very important that we listen well to understand other partners' hopes and dreams, as well as their concerns and constraints.
It doesn't matter if you are right. Focus on the outcome. As Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind.
You brought your partners into your community for a reason, for the abilities they have that complement each other. Respect that. Understand what their part of the puzzle is, like a good band that plays together. Each instrument is important. Allow them autonomy to do what they do best without micromanaging. Value their time, allow them to accomplish what they do best on their own, and not push them into doing things that they're not good at. All that together values skills, and this is most important if you're working with volunteers, which is what I do.
It's valuable to not care who gets the credit. The credit and the outcome is everyone's reward. Also, praise your other partners. Nobody does it alone. Doing it together is what breeds success.
Thanks, guys. Hey, that actually worked. And then several of the other partners in this screen and Natural Heritage Commission staff, who are all too busy, I couldn't get anybody to come up here, said, hey, what makes a good partner is somebody who brings something valuable to the table. Somebody who really wants to accomplish something. Somebody who always shows up when a partner calls for help. Somebody who is regularly congratulating others. And somebody who does not sweat the small stuff, Let's just get it 80% right, and then we'll do the next iteration. Not worry about some of the things that we're not aligned with yet. So you work hard together to accomplish these great multi-partner outcomes. And they're pretty exciting. You see them on the landscape, you see the habitats improving, you see the species increasing. Who knows about them? Who appreciates them? I mean, who cares? Obviously, these guys care. I mean, they're a beneficiary of it. But what people do you want to appreciate your work? Who's your constituency? Because these guys don't vote. Be it landowners, be it politicians, be it corporate leaders, oftentimes it can be pretty perplexing to understand what in the world is going through their mind, because sometimes their world and their context is so very different than ours and what we go through in accomplishing our own conservation goals. The Nature Conservancy goes through the exact same thing. Many of you would think, oh, the Nature Conservancy, it's a recognized brand, it's this huge organization, well-funded in 35 countries. It's got, guess what the general public awareness of the Nature Conservancy is? 3 to 4%. After millions and millions and probably tens of millions of dollars trying to increase the awareness of it. So we definitely do not have it figured out. What I'd like to close with is describe sort of 2 examples that we went through recently here locally that were related to building, which had a component of trying to build a constituency, support for conservation. One was the White River Blueway. Has anybody heard of that? Yep. So the Blueway was a Department of Interior initiative to recognize ecologically significant rivers throughout the country that had a lot of historical partnership work, and then develop a program to try and encourage people working together and direct funding and resources to those partnership groups so they could accomplish something on the ground. It was a great idea, but was not necessarily rolled out or shared with leadership around the country in such a way that they understood it. And so there was a lot of concern, confusion, which grew into pushback, which became legislative hearings in several states, including Arkansas, where hundreds of private landowners were concerned about potential private property takings by the government because they hadn't been included in the process of this program. Eventually, a local legislator here held a hearing, and all of the Arkansas partners at the hearing respectfully requested the Department of Interior that they remove the designation for our local river, the White River, and cancel the program, which led to cancellation of the program. Pretty rough. Another example is based on some historic work between several partners here and local county judges who were just trying to fix badly eroding roads to improve the driving experience for the public, to reduce the cost that the county was spending to maintain the roads by fixing them better, in a better way this current time, by reducing the amount of sediment that was going into rivers, by improving the habitat of endangered species. The program was the individual projects and the workshops were very effective, and so the County Judges Association and the Farm Bureau came to the partners and said, hey, this is really working really well, let's develop a statewide program. And during this last legislative session, this group of partners, Arkansas Association of Counties, Farm Bureau, multiple conservation organizations and agencies got together and passed an unpaved roads improvement program on behalf of the counties. And it was sponsored by this woman who was the legislator who shepherded it through the legislature and secured funding, and was the exact same person who killed the Blueway And so during our constituency building workshop, this will be one of the things we'll be exploring about different ways that conservation projects can be developed and different styles in working with partners that can help build a constituency for essentially the same thing and ways that might turn people off. So I thought I would close by relaying one of my good friends, Theo Witzel's response to what it means to be a good partner. And Theo's quote is, "End your talk 5 minutes early so I can have another 5 minutes for mine," which is what I'm going to do. Thank you all very much, and thanks for coming a little while.